Thank you. Hello, my name is Isabelle Astic, and I am a student at the CNAM Cedric Laboratory. The CNAM is famous because it is able to keep people learning all the day, all the life long. And so that's why I'm still a PhD student. The purpose of my laboratory is to build application, pervasive and ubiquitous application for museum. And my personal interest are games, pervasive games. And specifically, I would like to balance learning and playing in these games. Thank you. So to make this balance, it is important to know things about the players. First solution is profiling, but now with Smart Museum, you could do better by using data from people, from players, and to adapt dynamically the game to the player. But sometimes storytelling, learning, and adaptivity is a difficult mixing. Okay, thank you. So my purpose today is to say that transmedia pervasive serious games of emergence are a solution to this difficulty. This result appears after 3 experimentations we made at the Cedric Lab. We understood that mixing adaptivity and storytelling could be a great challenge for the curators, and that transmedia pervasive serious game of emergence could be a solution for the museum and beyond the museum. So the first experimentation we made at the Cedric Lab was a game called The Secret of the Museum. It was part of a project funded by the French government. The name of the project was PLUG, for Play Ubiquitous Games and Play More. At the beginning of the games, players received 4 virtual cards from 16 cards. And the purpose of the game was to gather 4 cards of the same color. The second purpose of the game was to earn the more points that the player could. So to gather the 4 virtual cards, player could exchange this card with other teams or exchange this card on the kiosk near the artifact. This exchange let them earn points. They could also earn points by answering quiz. The second experimentation was also another pervasive game called Paris Overnight University. It was a second game designed into this PLUG project. In this case, the learning content was really at the core of the game. It structures the game. The main message that the curators want to tell to the player is that an innovative object is part of a chain of innovation. And for this, we structure the game into a series of 4 quests, and with a final sequence, final scenes that will be a validation scene. Each quest was structured into 2 steps. First, a localization phase, then an understanding phase. This understanding phase lets player understand how the object works. At the end of the game, players have to explain to the other players what they understood, and they have to explain the link between one object to the other. This explanation was made also in front of the curators. And it is a way for the curators to see if their message was well understood. The third experimentation was made in the ArtSense European project. It was a project funded by the European Commission. The purpose of this project was to build an adaptive, reality-augmented tour into the museum. Visitors wore glasses with eye tracker. They also wore biosensors. And depending on the, beer sensors and eye trackers helps to define the level of interest of the visitors. Depending on this level of interest, then the system sends the right content to the visitors. This content was chosen from the content tree that was predefined by the users, as you could see on the right of the picture. So, I told you about that. So, what about adaptivity, storytelling, and learning? First, adaptivity and storytelling. In the first case, in the first game, adaptivity was plugged into the rules of the game itself. That means there is a game design mapping between rules and psychological characteristics of people. For example, to answer quiz, to explore means that you are curious. To put the right card on the right kiosk means that to reveal that you have a civic-minded aptitude. So here, the content and the learning content, the cultural content, is independent of adaptivity. It is not the same with the two other experimentation. In Paris Overnight University, adaptivity was plugged into the narration, but in a small part of the narration, only in the understanding phase. Here, curators have to define the question in 3 levels: difficult, medium, and easy. And the system dynamically change the switch from one level to another, depending on the time players spend on answering questions. So the difficulty for the curator was to define question with the lower level question, highlighting the higher level, but without redundancy. In the Art Sense project, here, the length of the content was defined by the biosensor sampling frequency. Each 5 seconds, the biosensor sends to the system an evaluation of the visitor interest. That means that if this interest changes in a quite obvious way, then the system switches dynamically to another content, another subject. And if not, then the system sends more detailed information about the current subject. So that means that all the subjects that you have seen into the tree on the past image, all these subjects have to be cut into small pieces of 5 seconds. And this is the problem with adaptivity. Adaptivity, when it influences storytelling, means that you have to split narration into self-contained elements, but with possible dependency. What about storytelling and learning? Lindley in the 206 defined the theoretical creation process in 5 steps. First, you have the structural substrate level, where you define all the elements of the story, the characters, the events. And these elements are reordered in a chronological order to make the story. This is the whole global story. But the narrator, most of the time, takes some elements of this story that he wants to enlighten. They are the plot. And these plots are reordered to make the narration that is materialized after into a narrative that could be a novel, a movie, or a poem, or anything. So here, narration seems to be an ordered set of plots, and this order defines the consistency of the narration. To our point of view, consistency relies with learning. So, the challenge for curator is this one. In one hand, there is adaptivity, which means that narration is split into self-contained pieces with possible dependency and no predefined order. On the other hand, you need consistency, and that means that you need ordered pieces of narration. So how to balance consistency and adaptivity, how to maintain a learning experience. Solutions that we have found into our experimentation depend on where the adaptivity is plugged into the narration, into the creation process of narration. In the game Paris Overnight University, adaptivity is plugged into to the narration level. You had a strong narration. I told you that curators want to tell them a message that innovative object is a part of a chain of innovation. So here, adaptivity was plugged into a small part of this narration. It was plugged only into the understanding phase of the game. And at the end of this sequence, then player come back to the main narration. So here, it is a way to maintain the consistency of the narration. In the arts and experimentation, it is quite different, because here, adaptivity is plugged at the plot level. If you remember the content tree that I showed you, this content tree, in fact, is all the possibility of instantiation of the plot into narration, all the possible order that characters allows. But when you put adaptivity at that level, the risk is to cut all the links that you define into the tree, and so to lose the consistency. To avoid this problem, we decide to define metadata that helps the system to choose some good content to send to the player, to the visitor, sorry. PSM, the Secret of a Museum, the last game, is another solution. Here, we work at the structural substrate. I mean, we never create narration. We give to the player all the tools to play and to make this narration. The narration is defined upon the events, upon the emotions, upon the resources that players take into account. So here, it is the player that makes the narration, and it is the player that makes the consistency of the narration. And to our point of view, to my point of view, it is a good solution for our problem. And this solution is transmedia. It's transmedia game, transmedia and pervasive games of emergence. So, what are games of emergence? Emergence, game of emergent are specified with a small number of rules that could be combined by the player to define his own strategy of play. Well-known example of a game of emergence are chess or The Sims. So you have resources, you have actions, you know you could use all of them, but you could use like you want to use it, to use them to play the game as you want. Pervasive games. Okay. Pervasive games integrate the player's environment into the gameplay. That means that you could take into account the context of the player, and you could take into account all the emotion, all the feelings of the player. And it mixes virtuality and reality. Transmedia games are transmedia which owns a narration that is unfolds across multiple media platforms. And that means that you could use all these platforms, all these media when you want. And all these different media, as Jenkins says, make a distinctive and valuable contribution to the whole. So why this kind of games are a solution? Because they already mix adaptivity, narration, and learning. They are adaptive at the rules level, and they are, the transmedia characteristic also augments the adaptivity, because people could choose which media they want. It is exactly what the person before me said. We have several way to learn, and you could, with that kind of type of game, you could change the media that you better like. Players create their own narration from action and resources, and so they are responsible of the consistency of the narration. But the difficulty here is to maintain the learning experience that the curator wants. We made the mistake with the game Secret of Museum. In these games, cultural content were just one resource among others. And also, answering quiz was one way of play among others. And players could play without answering one quiz. So that was a problem. That's why I say that if you want a learning experience, then action and resources must absolutely deal with the learning message. And this type of game has the advantage that the only constraints that I see is that each content should give a clue to another. And this is a transmedia characteristic. And in fact, it is what is done in museum. You have several contents on several media, and all of them are speaking of the same thing. So there is always a link between these different media contents. So this type of game fosters the transmedia characteristics of museum. Also, they are replayable, and it is important for a museum because all the works that is done for this game could be reused again and again, and could be reused by the same player. Like chess or The Sims, you could play session with the same pleasure. And this game could be used beyond museum, because museum could be seen as a microcosm of the smart city. As alternative reality games that are pervasive games, they are well suited for the 21st century literacies. They allow to manage data that surrounding us. They allow to gather them and to make sense about them. They teach us to solve problems or to create new solutions for a problem, and they teach us how to respect the other and to collaborate with the other teams. So if we are following within Kailua that say that games at the birth of a culture, maybe we could wonder if that kind of games are not at the rise of the new culture, the digital culture. In fact, they at least help us to manage all the data and to learn how to use this data in smart cities. Thank you for your attention.